Over 80,000 of you that have watched this video are majority asking the same question. Can DWP force you to give them bank statements, and can they ask you what you're spending your money on? In this video, I'm going to be breaking this all down, and I'm also, for my YouTube members only, going to be issuing a template letter that you can use to send to DWP. I want to point out this is not legal advice. This is advice from my good self, a formal civil servant who sued quite successfully the Department of Work and Pensions twice. One for unlawful harassment, and secondly for failure to make reasonable adjustments. It would appear that the Department of Work and Pensions seems to be one of the largest organisations that doesn't seem to know their policies very well and fails to implement them as well. So let's get back to the facts. And by the way, yes, I've seen all the comments about the petition. I have started a petition. It is new, so it's currently in review. The minute it's out of review again, I'm going to be blasting you all with it. Thank you all so much for supporting me, for supporting the Justice Journals, for supporting everybody else who is affected by these changes and the unlawfulness in lots of cases of the actions of departments like DWP. So let's look at two comparative opinions, or statements I should say, from my followers. So I've got them coming to see me next week. My bank statements will show all my income and outgoing totals, each individual income transactions, but I'll be redacting, so blacking out, each individual outgoing transactions. Income shows no evidence of fraud, and what I spend my income on has sod all to do with them. And KD Lofty, I'm inclined to agree with you. However, it hasn't been that easy for lots of universal credit claimants. So I am going to be breaking all of this down for every single person who is affected by this in this video. But KD Lofty, not everyone has had the same experience as you. So Tobias says, I reducted my outgoings on statements that I gave to DWP Job Centre in Fort William. They refused and requested it fully undiscovered. I think that's undisclosed. I was blackmailed by the threat of stopping my benefits for the information required. I refused. I lost my benefits and housing benefit and had to reapply or end up on the streets. Effing raging with tyrant dictators. Now, I'm really concerned that your benefit was actually stopped, and I'm going to give you some tips on what you should do about that. And again, everything I say is not legal advice. Always take full legal advice, but I will be breaking down government policies as a formal civil servant, as I said, and helping DWP. If you're watching, because you do quite often watch my content, maybe you want to go off and do some staff training after this video. So first of all, let's get into the parliamentary legalities, things that are stated in Parliament, in law, of what DWP can and cannot do. Let's start with that first of all. So let's call up the bad boy, which has generated, I think, a lot of all of this, which is the new bill, the Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, which is actually at the report stage. Shockingly enough, it's got to this point. As we can see, it's gone through the various stages. So this is the biggie, the big deal. First of all, I'm going to explain exactly what it means that it's at the report stage. So if you want to take action, legal action, or I should say civil action, then you will know how to do so. And then we'll get on to the bits about DWP and how to deal with them. So the first point here is this is a bill. It is not law, okay? It is not law. It has not gone before royal assent. It cannot be referred to or implicated or implemented, I should say, as law, because it's not. And it appears to be that DWP seem to be doing that, surprisingly enough, or maybe not if you've had any close encounters with them before. So it's already had the committee stage, which is where MPs in the Commons or peers in the Lords could go through the bill line by line and suggest amendments. But at the report stage, the bill is considered again, and now any MP can suggest amendments. So first straight off the bat, if you disagree with this, you should be writing to your MP and you should be asking your MP to lodge your dissatisfaction or your non-agreement with this through the proper processes, and hopefully your MP will support you on that. Now, at the report stage, this is where the bigger picture gets elaborated on: civil rights, privacy, all of those things that everyone is up in arms about in the comments, and quite rightly so. So I'm still rather shocked that it's got to this stage, given the fact of how the general public feel about this. Very similar to the digital ID, which we'll also touch on later in this video. So after this stage, it will then proceed on to the third reading. Then it moves on to the House of Commons and the Lords. And once both parties agree, or if they agree, it then gets royal assent. And it's at that point, and not before, that it becomes law. So there we go. There is the big old bill. Now let's get into the elements of Universal Credit Land and what they're doing. And to do that, we need to be considering what is actually law right now if you claim universal credit. And there's really only one piece of law, I think, that is relevant to this with bank statements if you're on universal credit, and it is this. Under the Social Security Administration Act of 1992, DWP can request evidence, listen clearly, evidence of income, savings and capital if you are under a case review. That is the law. And if you are under a case review, they can ask for bank statements, evidence of income, dividends, wages, other benefits, or any other income that seems unexplained or something that they can't seem to understand. They cannot require you to disclose, or even worse, justify what you're spending your income on unless it's directly related to eligibility. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples for this. Let's just say you withdrew £500 from your bank account, out in cash, obviously, because we can't draw it out really in any other way. DWP cannot ask you what you spent that £500 on that you withdrew from the cash point. They can't ask you what you spent that money on, period. If they suspect fraud, and in order to suspect fraud, you would need to be under case review. And that can also extend to undeclared partners, other people living in your household, or even in some cases not living in your household. So for example, you might be spending half of your week at your house, half of your week at a partner's house, and not disclosing it. That would potentially constitute fraud. Anyway, if they suspect fraud, they may try and link your outgoings to that allegation, the allegation that they would be making within their fraud report. But, and this is very important, they must have a lawful basis and very good evidence of suspicion, not just fishing. So if you feel that the data that is being requested of you, or you are being forced to disclose data, and you're not under a case review, such as Tobias here, this could be very, very serious for the Department of Work and Pensions. Number one, harassment. Number two, to actually threaten somebody with ceasing their benefit and then actually stopping them. Could be a number of things. It could definitely be misrepresentation of legal authority, very similar to abuse of power. And again, I am going to stipulate that this is not legal advice. Anybody can look these laws up. But quite frankly, if you do, under the Human Rights Act, Article 8, people do have the right to privacy. In actual fact, Article 8 and Article 10. Article 8 is the right to privacy, and there is also something which is called fair processing. But Article 8 protects people from disproportionate interference in private life, including financial privacy, unless justified by law. We also have the Equality Act of 2010. Many universal credit claimants are disabled or have long-term health conditions, so automatically cutting benefits from somebody who is already clearly vulnerable for non-disclosure of irrelevant personal data, which they're not mandated legally to request, may amount to a failure to make reasonable adjustments and or indirect disability discrimination, particularly if the person needs adjustments for how they provide evidence. And I'm going to go one step further here. The UK is actually considered the gold seal of data protection in GDPR. And GDPR requires that data collected is necessary, personal data is necessary and proportionate for the stated purpose, forcing disclosure of full outgoings, i.e. every shop purchase, medical payment, cash withdrawal, when not strictly relevant, breaches the principle of data minimization, Article 5 of GDPR. Denying benefits because someone exercised their GDP rights, reducting irrelevant personal data in itself is unlawful. I would most definitely argue that it is, but again, take legal advice. I'm quite sure the Black Belt Barrister could give further insight into this on YouTube, or Stephen Barrett, another UK barrister, also here on YouTube, two professionals who I thoroughly recommend for being just amazing at what they do, particularly in the legal stance. So let's get on to the next part, which is the case reviews. Now, you're only going to be under a case review really in a few circumstances. One is if you've got a brand new universal credit claim, or you've reopened a universal credit claim, and some of the data that you have maybe, or some of the information you've put on your new claim doesn't really marry up with other things that you've stated in previous claims, or from other systems, because of course we know the government already do cross-reference all sorts of things. That's the first reason. The second reason is if you have been, you're being investigated for fraud, quite frankly. So a case review can sometimes be the first stage of fraud investigation. Now, don't panic, first of all, if this is you. Because if it is, DWP are still, just decided where I'm going to put this, still going to have to follow principles. So the first one is that they must act legally within the law, so not asking for information that they are not legally required to do. They have to be rational in the questions that they're asking and the information that they are requesting. It can't be arbitrary, and it can't be deemed as potentially being unfair, i.e. maybe you've made a complaint against DWP for something, and the next thing you know, you're in a case review and you're feeling victimized because maybe that you have made it a complaint saying they have not followed the Equality Act and made reasonable adjustments. For example, not allowed you to have a telephone consultation and forced you instead to go to the job centre, which resulted in you having a panic attack and all sorts of other things like that. And then lastly, and most importantly, if you are on or you believe you are on a case review, is that you should be given clear reasons and the process explained to you. So suspending benefits without a lawful case review or clear statutory power could be challenged in lots of legal remits, and most definitely would be unreasonable. But like I said, this is not legal advice. Please do get that from somebody else or two of the other YouTube accounts here that I have recommended. So if you have not been told that you are under a case review and you're being asked for bank statements, the first thing you need to do is put in writing, can you please ask for what purpose you require these bank statements? They will respond to you. If they don't, write again, and then ask them to point you to the policy or the law that mandates this. Okay, the policy or the law that mandates this. If they refer you to DWP guidance, know that there is a big difference between DWP guidance and law. Not everything in DWP guidance is law, i.e. it might be, a good idea, it might explain their processes, but sometimes processes can indeed flout the law. The simple fact that people who are not under investigation of fraud, are not under universal credit claim eligibility investigations, are being asked to disclose what they're spending their money on and having their benefits stopped as a result of that is indeed a reason why there are laws. And DWP would do well to remember that. They're not above the law. Let's not forget that either. And again, if you want a copy of the template letter that I have written, I've put it in the YouTube membership area for YouTube members. You can download it, use it, just change your name, your address and other little bits and bobs. But it's going to have the vital key information on there that you need. So currently the Social Security Act is current, right? So they can only do things in relation to that. So money coming in, wages, self-employment earnings, pensions, benefits, rental income, even capital, so money or assets you own, savings, investments, property in the UK or property in another country. Of course, DWP can ask you for evidence of that. That is because the Social Security Act or the Social Security Administration Act of 1992 says that they can, because it has passed, and it has passed before, the proper powers that be. But what they can't do is ask for proof of expenditure, what you spend your money on. Not yet. So bills, shopping, travel, cash withdrawals, they can't. Now, even when it comes to investigation under the Social Security Administration Act of 1992, DWP has powers to investigate income and capital because those affect entitlement. So if you are under fraud investigation, that would be a different law that would apply, which is why it's important for you to ask if you are under a case review and the reason by which you are under a case review. Because expenditure, so what you spend your money on, what, once you've got it, is not part of that law. And there is currently no legal power, I don't believe, and I obviously stand to be corrected, but I cannot see that there is currently a legal power for DWP to force disclosure of day-to-day spending habits of universal credit claimants as at any point, but in particular as a systematic process of being a universal credit claimant. Now, I am really shocked at the volume of people that are being asked this. So I'm going to give you another little piece of info. And of course, guys, if you want more tips like this, and obviously anything to do with disability discrimination, because it's one of my little bugbears and one of my areas of concern right now, make sure you subscribe. So for the bank statements, put in writing, ask them to confirm in writing what legal authority they are relying on for the request. If you've done that in your journal, make sure you take a screenshot of it in your journal and upload it to your G Drive. Know that work coaches and team leaders can delete journal messages on both sides. So if you want to have a clear evidence trail, you will want to screenshot that. Ideally, email it back to yourself so it's timed and date stamped. If you feel that your privacy rights, in particular asking about your transactional spending habits without lawful reason to do so, is being breached, you can consider raising a formal complaint to DWP. I should imagine it will go nowhere, but then you can of course escalate it to the independent case examiner or even the Information Commissioner's Office. Now, I am considering whether this should be done globally, because there are so many of you actually having concerns about this. So the Information Commissioner's Office are obviously the people that decide what is lawful and not lawful with GDPR, and can indeed fine DWP, who have actually been fined quite a fair few times before by the ICO for breach of data protection. And let's not forget, in my own case alone, they publicised 300 universal credit claimants' full names and national insurance numbers in public court documents. Terrible. I will always say, when you're dealing with a DWP, I know sometimes it feels like you're dancing with the devil, quite literally, but just remember to stay calm, professional, and do everything in writing. And if somebody reaches out to you on the phone to discuss something that you have raised a concern about, unless you require that as a reasonable adjustment, I would most definitely ensure that you keep it all in writing, because at the end of the day, data never lies. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me for this little update. I love reading the comments. The more comments I see, the more videos I think, I could make a video and help you guys out with that. Thank you so much. And don't forget, you can also become a member over the Justice Journal's website as well, and there you can even have access to private one-to-one consultations with me. Primarily I deal with access to work claims, PIP assessments, reviews, and also I share there all of my employment tribunal resources and tools that I created to slay the dragon, and some of those you may find rather useful. Anyway, have a great day, and I will see you in my next YouTube. Thanks guys, goodbye.